Alright, so welcome to this morning's skills session. We've got a packed house here, so if you do have chairs next to you, just sort of, if you see people coming in, just raise a hand and make sure that they can see that their space is available. Ideally, we should be all set, but just wanted to give everyone a heads up on that one. Before we jump into the formal programming, I'd like to quickly bring to the stage, as it is, a CGI U student who has been asked to tell us about the work he's taken on and the progress of the commitment that he's made in years past. So, Jordan, if you'd like to come up here. We challenged Jordan and Hatar to summarize the work that he's been involved in under 2 minutes, or 2 minutes or around there. So we hope that you guys will take the time afterwards to speak with him to learn more about his work. So please welcome Jordan. He's from California State University, Long Beach. Bringing their cities to the world community.
Hey everyone, my name is Jordan Hatar. I attended CGI U last year with the commitment to make a documentary in South Sudan. I lived in South Sudan after high school. I was really passionate about trying to make a difference there. But I met an attendee here at CGI U last year that really changed my life. She started talking about what was going on in Syria, and it really just struck a chord with my heart. So I ended up going to Syria, to the Syrian refugee camp on the Syrian-Jordan border. I was there for 3 months, and my main goal was just to find out how I can make a difference and find out what their biggest need is. I found out that their biggest need was better housing and just people to be a voice for them. And so I really wanted, to be there to help them, because they invited me in at lunch, to eat their refugee rations with them, and they didn't have to to share their refugee rations with me. So I really wanted to meet their generosity, and so I collaborated with a Stanford student, and we started raising money for these prefabricated housing units to try to, help them meet their biggest need. And so far we've been able to raise $12,000 of our goal of $45,000, which is it'll give a house for 20 people so far in the refugee camp. When I was there back in December, 12 people passed away in the refugee camp. 12 little kids. And so pretty much I wanted to get as many people as I could involved. So I got an organization, World Outside My Shoes, and also Syria Deeply, and the head of Syria Deeply was a moderator here at CGI U. So CGI U allowed me to get involved with relevant organizations. And I got to meet with Ban Ki-moon and just tell them, the refugees, what their biggest need is, because they felt like they weren't being heard in this world. So pretty much, I came to CGI U last year with a commitment, really focused on trying to make a difference in South Sudan. But my heart told me, that, Syria was where I needed to be. And so my message would be, you don't always need a specific skill to make a difference. I didn't really know why I was going, but I knew I needed to go. And so I was able to, report from the refugee camp, and now I'm trying to, get people better housing there. So really, just where our greatest passion, meets the world's greatest need is really, I think, the crossroads where we should all be. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jordan. That was fantastic. And again, let's congratulate him again on this accomplishment and on pursuing future goals. I think that was fantastic. So I'd like our speakers, Preeta, Nayak, and Tyler Spencer, to sort of wheel their way. The other thing is, if maybe it might be useful. I don't know if people can either sit on the staircases. I can also sort of take a peek out and see if I can find other chairs as well. It looks like we are pretty much packed here, but I'll see what I can do. Otherwise, grab a seat where you can, and I'll take a dive in the next room and see what we can do. So quickly, Preeta Nayak is the manager of Leading for Impact at the Bridgespan Group, and Tyler Spencer is the founder and CEO of the Grassroot project. And they'll be discussing specific steps and tools that you can incorporate into your organizational leadership strategies. So we'll start with Tyler, and then we'll follow that up with a presentation from Preeta as well. And hopefully then we'll have sufficient time to capture all of the questions that you guys have as well.
Cool. So I'm Tyler Spencer. I'm from Washington, D.C., and I was, I guess, 2 years ago sitting in the same seat that you are today. And when I was thinking about, Preeta and I were talking about what would be most effective for this session, I think, for me at least, I'm going to start with just kind of telling you guys the story of my path from where you are now to where I am now, which I think is full of some, big successful milestones, but also probably an equal number of challenges. And I think in the nonprofit sector, often we're discouraged from talking about our failures, but I think we hopefully have a lot to learn from some of the mistakes that we've made with my organization in the last few years. So the Grassroot project. When I was an undergrad, I thought I would be a career environmental scientist. And I was really interested in conservation research in South Africa. And when I was 19, I was living with this guy, Elias, during the summer in between 2 years of college, and I was studying human-wildlife conflict in Kruger National Park. And one night, Elias' ex-girlfriend called us over and over and over again. We were having dinner, and eventually I was like, just answer the phone. And she had just found out that she had become HIV positive, and she was so distressed about it that she didn't feel like she had anyone to talk to except for Elias. And she was so scared about asking people for support and what was sort of next for her that she was considering ending her own life. And it was a really traumatic experience for me. Fortunately, we were able to talk her out of this, and she's now healthy and happy and getting treatment for her HIV. But for me, kind of just like Jordan, my interest really changed because I was just shocked by this disease that was in theory 100% preventable, but 1 in 4 people in Elias' community had it, but also treatable, and people weren't accessing treatment because of the stigma around HIV/AIDS. And I was an athlete in college, and realized in South Africa every single person wanted to talk to me about the World Cup and soccer every single day, but nobody wanted to talk about the HIV/AIDS epidemic that was killing 1 in 4 people in their community. So I ended up working in Elias's community for 2 summers. I came back and was working with this larger NGO setting up soccer-based HIV/AIDS education programs. And my senior year of college, how many people are seniors? I was like pretty stressed out because all my friends were taking these jobs and these cool consulting jobs, going on to medical school, law school, and kind of the defining experience for me in college was the work that I've done in Elias's community. And it was difficult because I wanted to continue doing that, but it was really unclear how that could be a career and how I could really make a living doing that. And I was really fortunate. Like a couple months before school ended, this nonprofit in Washington, D.C. Asked me to create a 1-page fact sheet on the HIV/AIDS epidemic in D.C., which I'd lived in D.C., but when I was in D.C., I was so focused on my next summer trip to South Africa and, flying halfway around the world to fight this epidemic there. Is anyone from D.C.? D.C.'s HIV/AIDS epidemic is on par with several sub-Saharan African countries. When I was making this fact sheet, I learned 1 in 20 people in DC is living with HIV. And it was so shocking because nobody knew about it. Like people in the communities that were hardest hit either didn't know about it or they were just like Elias's girlfriend. Like they were so scared to talk about it with their friends and really do something about it. So I started this organization called the Grassroot Project. Essentially what I did was I took the same model I've been using in South Africa and I trained 40 of my teammates from Georgetown and a couple other athletes from Georgetown, and we ran these sports-based, not soccer-based, but just generally sports-based HIV/AIDS education programs in 4 schools in DC. And my first commitment to action at CGI U was to really scale up the organization. We saw, we were all really excited about the impact we were having. We had teachers and principals and kids and parents and athletes saying, let's build something from this, like let's keep things moving. But I wanted to see the impact of the program and didn't see myself as like a CEO. I didn't see myself as a people manager. So I've had a lot of challenges in the last couple of years trying to become that figure and learned a lot of lessons along the way. So I don't have a lot of time now, but I hope we can talk more in the Q&A. But I want to just give 3 bits of advice. The first one is cover your fundamentals. Can anyone raise their hand and tell me what is a needs assessment? Don't be shy. What is a needs assessment? What does that mean?
Going into a particular area of the community and hearing from them what actually their needs are, what they perceive them through discussion surveys, conversations, interviews, and local leaders as well.
That's a really thorough answer to what a needs assessment is. And I can't harp on this enough. I think the way a lot of people perceive people our age right now, I think a lot of people see us as really idealistic, ambitious doers, but not planners. And when I was starting this organization, it was fall 2008, which is arguably the worst possible time for anyone to be starting a nonprofit organization. What made it worse is that I was 22 years old. I had no real independent management experience. I had no money of my own, and I hardly had just had a college degree. And I think the perception from the outside world is that you might have lots of passion, but you should just go to grad school or work with another organization before you try to move your own forward. So doing a needs assessment is really important for two reasons. One is when you're talking to people and trying to get them behind your organization and build your team, you can identify and impress them really clearly with knowing exactly not just some idea and some difference that you're passionate about and is probably legitimate, but also to say, I know very well this gap that I'm addressing. I know what all the other organizations in DC are doing. I know the stats from the government about what populations we should be targeting. And I think people will be very, very impressed with that pitch as much as they're impressed by your energy and your passion to make a difference. The second reason is that it'll help you identify partners. A lot of times you might not, if you don't do a thorough needs assessment, you might not know that there's a great organization that you can work with and you can save lots of time and lots of money to sort of leverage each other's resources to make a difference. The second point I have is know that it seems super intuitive, but know that your passion is your greatest asset by far, and really be confident in that. Early on with Grassroots, I was out of control. Hustling hard was our motto. I went through Georgetown's course offering directory, and I searched every single department's course offerings that were related to HIV/AIDS, community service, any type of stuff in DC. And I just went and asked every single professor to meet with me. I asked to speak in front of classes to try to recruit volunteers. I went to the athletic department and every single coach at Georgetown. And the reason we were able to get started is because people saw the energy that I had and the fact that I wanted to talk to them and get their help and ideas on this project. The mistake that we made as years went on and we started to scale up is that we just started sending these mass emails to people saying here's what Grassroots is, come join, come help us out. And when I removed that personable interaction and that passion behind the organization and turned it into something on paper, we were much less successful in getting things done. So just realize that you will probably be a big reason that the organization gets started and grows. The last piece of advice, I hope I'm not going over my time. Okay. The last piece of advice is think about the longevity of your project. And I read actually this week somewhere in social media some article about top 10 qualities of lean startup organizations. And the number one bit of advice was team first, product second. And I just thought that was the worst advice I could imagine. The reason you start these organizations is you're so excited about the project, the program, the difference that you're making. And what you will probably be doing is trying to get the product out there, run as many programs as you can, get people to actually be delivering the services. The problem is, as you grow as an organization, you really need to start thinking about what the organization looks like 5 years from now, and start building some of the processes, understanding how to delegate power to people and or different tasks to people, and thinking about managing money as you start to get more money. These things are not intuitive early on, but are really important and can save you time in the long run if you're able to balance your focus on the product with some degree of attention to the reality that you need to also be thinking about your team. How many people with their commitments, a show of hands, imagine being involved with their commitment a year from now? That's awesome. 2 years from now. 5 years from now? 10 years from now? Okay, so the number goes down. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, we are young people, there's going to be tons of opportunities presented to us, and there are tons of ways to make a difference in the world outside of a nonprofit organization that are just as valid. But I think it's like just seeing how the hands went down as we went over time, it's very clear that we are getting things started, but we also anticipate getting involved in other things. So for that reason, and that reason alone, you should be thinking about longevity of your organization and how you're going to transfer your passion and your skills to people behind you to make it sustainable. I think that's my 13.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I started out my career as a middle school history teacher, so you can see that still in me. Thanks, Tyler. That was wonderful, and I think you actually underestimate all that you've already learned and accomplished. Well, first off, it's just wonderful to be here, and I would extend a congratulations to all of you, because I think when I think back to my own undergrad experience, while I was involved in service activities and education in particular, I don't think I had made the level of commitment I think all of you already have or are going to make in your time here. So it's wonderful. My own background is a little similar to Tyler's in that I've been in the social sector my whole career. I started off as a middle school history teacher, went on to run educational programs, and at some point basically just realized that what I really enjoyed was working with nonprofit organizations to figure out the thorniest problems. Really just when something was really hard to dig in on it for a year or two. And so it turns out that there's a job for that. It's called consulting, management consulting. And I was lucky enough to join the Bridgespan group, which focuses on providing not just management consulting services, but also knowledge and leadership development support for nonprofits and foundations. And that's where I've been for the last 8 years. And so, in thinking about today and the conversation and the topic of organizational capacity, I mean, there's so much to be said. But I was having lunch with a client of mine, an entrepreneur who I think started off much like you. He founded essentially like a club in college to work with students, high school students, on civic engagement in politics. And then his graduation weekend, a funder came to him and said, "Look, we'll give you $50,000. We can make this a real organization. Can we talk about making this a 501c3?" And he said, "Okay, I'll give it a shot." And now they're across the country in multiple sites in a multi-million-dollar organization within about 5 or 6 years. So he's had a great path. The question we were talking about, though, is I said, how do you use your time, right? Because that for all of you, for a CEO in particular, how do you make the trade-offs that you have to make? And he's quite wise, and he said, Preeta, I try to focus on 3 things, or at least try to focus on 3 things. And I even look back at my calendar to see, is this what I did with my time? And those 3 things were, first, strategy. Like, if I don't need a strategy, who will in this organization? The second thing was capital, right? Chief fundraiser. And the third thing was talent. And so what I thought I would do today, and that absolutely sounded right to me. What I thought I'd do today is just share, like Tyler, a few bits of advice or thoughts on each of those. And there's a lot more on any of these topics for anyone who visits Bridgespan's website or sees our web papers. On the strategy topic, let me ask first how if someone can just give me a definition of strategy. What does it mean to have a strategy? Yeah.
I think it's a set of strategic goals that you aim to achieve and a specific plan, action plan how you are going to achieve those strategic goals.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a link here is, or sort of a key to it is, to actually understand, given the limited resources you have, and everybody has limited resources, nonprofit, for-profit, what are the set of actions and goals that make the most sense so you can make the most out of those limited resources? How can you be sure that you're consistently making the right choice in use of your time, your money, your activities? And one thing that we found to be quite helpful in our work is just creating a very clear but rigorous intended impact statement. So most of you, if you go to most nonprofit organizations' websites or wherever else, you'll see a great and inspiring and important mission statement. But that's often very broad, right? So on the flight here yesterday from San Francisco, I actually ran into a former client who's just started a new nonprofit that's focused on ending child slavery, which is terrific, right? But that's not, and we didn't claim while I was standing on the aisle, did not go through his intended impact statement, but I was tempted to ask. But the difference between that and an intended impact statement is to actually ask yourself, okay, what am I actually going to hold myself accountable to, right? Like, he's not going to hold himself accountable over the next 5 years to ending child slavery, right? But what are the, and there are ways to think about that, right? Where are you most interested in addressing this challenge? Which are which industries are the ones that you look at? Over what period of time do you expect to get what done? And those feel like they're not as inspiring as the mission statement, but when at the end of the day you have to make a decision between starting one program or another, hiring one staff member or another, nothing's going to be more important than understanding very clearly what is success going to be for me. And will this get me towards that, or will this distract me from that? So the first thing is an intended impact statement, and that goes along with a theory of change, which is sort of a set of activities that get you there. The second thing that I think I mentioned was capital. And here also, I think there's over the course of your time in an organization, kind of a maturing that happens. Early on, when you're small, you're likely to be getting money wherever you can get it, from whomever you can get it from. But what we found is that those organizations that succeed over time and sustain themselves are actually quite thoughtful about understanding where their core funding should come from, and really thinking about the concept of a natural match. So given what you do, who has an incentive and a motivation to support that, right? So if you're working with puppies and, cute things, then you're probably going to be very appealing to individual donors, right? If you're doing something abstract, you're probably better off talking with an institutional donor. And if you're really lucky, there may be public dollars that go to what you do. So you have to think about that over time. And I'm not saying you can figure that out right away. Keep that in mind when you're having conversations. Who gets really excited? Who gives money year after year? Right? And that'll help you with your funding model. And the last topic, which Tyler already touched upon, is talent. And I couldn't agree more with the team and product comparison or comment, mostly because, frankly, your product is going to change, right? Your product is going to evolve. And the people who will make sure it evolves correctly, to make sure that you stay on course to get your intended impact, are really going to be the key. And I would say that one of the wonderful things about the work I've done is that I've gotten to meet a lot of great leaders. And the thing they have in common is not style. I mean, people come in all shapes and sizes. what they have in common is they understand their strengths and weaknesses, and they bring together a team that complements them. Right? So they understand that they're not detail-oriented, so they need to bring someone on board. Or they understand that they're not actually always that inspirational when they speak. They need to bring someone on board. So think about that, and don't just think about the team you need today, but have in mind what's the team I'm going to need tomorrow, or the next day. And then you'll do a much better job of when you see sort of the person who's like the diamond in the rough, capturing them, getting them involved, and building them. So when you really need those skills, you'll have them. So, strategy, capital, talent, right? 3 things to just keep in mind and you spend your time on.
Well, I wasn't sure if you guys wanted to continue running, but we're going to open things up for questions right now. We have plenty of time for you guys to.
Are we not doing small groups like that stuff?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, should we just do it, should we do that, or should we?
Yeah, so what I think might be a nice idea, because we do have a good amount of time.
Yeah, we do.
Is if you break into groups of, let's say, 5, so you kind of like huddle together and
5-ish, and like share.
Well, the topic was capacity building, organization building, right? And maybe something one of us said sort of resonated, or maybe not, and just have something else we want to talk about. But it'd be great to just kind of start some conversations on what you're wrestling with in terms of when you think about your own organization, and then when we come back together, maybe some of the questions that are coming up, we can share about.
I have an idea.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, so how about we just do groups of 2, and you'll have 1 minute, and no, I'll give you 2 minutes. The first person will have 2 minutes to talk to their partner about what their commitment to action is. I usually do like what your middle school screen name is, but I think you guys didn't even have screen names. Did you guys use AIA?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right, so to break the ice, you can share like what your middle school screen name was, and then you say what your commitment to action is, and then you say one like the reason that you came to this session and or a concern that you have about building your team. And then I'll say switch strictly at 2 minutes, and you switch right at 2 minutes, and the other person does it for 2 minutes. And then I'll give you 1 minute to make it 5 total, where you can talk about, like what questions you have for us out of that.
Screen name,
commitment, capacity, question, issue, concern, e.g. why are you in this room right now? Does that make sense?
I like it.
All right, ready? Go. So why don't we just open it up for questions, and when you ask a question, you have to first say your screen name.
My name is Benny. I'm from Morocco. My question was.
And your screen name? Okay.
Okay. My question is, how can you capitalize on our weaknesses to find the right harmony in the
Capitalize on your. Oh, I see what you mean. So, like, to my point that you should partner to compensate for your deficits. Well, I mean, I think first step is to actually be honest about understanding your deficits, and by that I mean, understanding your strengths, obviously, and asking about that, thinking about that, but also, talking to people you trust who have worked with you enough, and asking honestly of them, say, please tell me, if I'm going to partner with someone, what should I be looking for? Because I think unfortunately, we oftentimes don't get honest answers from people. Everyone just tells us nice things, and so you want to actually truly assess that. And then I think you just have to ask around, keep the conversation going. Once you know what you're looking for, not only look for it yourself, but tell So like Tyler's looking to fill some positions. So basically today, we put the whole morning together. I've been like asking everyone we talk to who they know that can fill his, because I think that's the best way to do it. So.
I would say with my organization, I think I was really lucky to just like happen upon a really good team dynamic with this girl who's a track athlete at Georgetown, and she joined our program right after our pilot program. There've been some issues we were talking about this morning, but she actually is really awesome. So I want to share why she's awesome. No, I want to share why she's awesome and why we complement each other really well when we're recruiting more schools. So we started with 40 athletes from Georgetown and 4 schools in DC, and then we really wanted to scale up. And the past 3 years, we've been able to add 427 athletes from 4 universities in DC, and we have 40 middle schools that we're partners with where we run programs as part of their PE class. And the reason we've been able to grow so much with the middle schools is because this girl, Deidre, she is very good at getting buy-in from the teachers in Southeast DC. And I think I'm really good at recruiting the college athletes. But we would go into these schools together. This is actually, I'm gonna be super honest, this is our strategy, it's crazy. But like we would go to schools on our own, to middle schools, and say we have this program, we want to bring college athletes in and talk to your kids about HIV, and like neither of us was really successful. And then we realized that like I wasn't successful because they're like, here comes this white dude saying he wants to talk to our kids about sex and HIV, get out of here. And Deidre would come in and they'd be like, this girl doesn't seem organized, she seems really young. And Deidre and I would go into schools, and this is like the admission here. We would act like we were a couple, and one of our kids was in the school, and we would just walk right in, and Deidre would be like, I need to see the PE teacher right now. And they would just point her down the hallway, and Deidre and I would go in, and in fact, we were such a dynamic team together. Half the PE teachers were looking for this guy who could like speak in the technical language, and the other half the PE teachers were looking for someone they could identify with and they knew could like really connect with the kids right off the bat. And so we both had like total different personalities, total different backgrounds, total different ways of speaking about the problem. But for that reason, we made like such a good team together. And I think that's like the epitome of trying to like be aware of what you're going to be good at and what you're not. And like I wasn't aware of it until I went and tried to do things. And it was like for some reason people just not responding. And the same thing with her. And we realized like as a team we could sort of address both these issues at the same time.
But for the record, one does not have to pretend that you're dating the people on your team, because from a longer-term career perspective, it's going to get complicated.
It was like the secretaries of the schools, and they would be like, this interracial couple coming in, like asking for the PE teacher.
Yeah, so you talked about, I guess, what you mentioned with finding a natural match for getting capital. So, like, how do you approach the source of capital without threatening them? Like, wanting to, I guess, change what they're already doing, because they're probably already doing something and doing it successfully already. So how do you, I guess, incorporate your idea into their pre-existing plan? And how do you not lose your idea, I guess, in the power dynamic of, trying to, I guess, approach a power source with things?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's definitely a balancing act you have to do, because there are going to be, if we take foundations, for example, as an example, so philanthropic institutions, there are going to be some that, and one way to do this is actually to research all the peers, people who are like you, who are they getting money from, right? How are they getting their dollars? And so there will be some that they're going to see in you a natural match, and so that will be simpler. If you've got an idea though that's relatively new or different, you may have to work your way into that conversation. The good news is, my experience has been that funders, whether they're individual givers or institutional givers, love new and innovative things, right? I mean, frankly, the harder thing can be getting people to sustain you once you're up and successful. So, I think that there is opportunity on the not changing yourself. At some point, it just requires confidence, and this is again where knowing your sort of intended impact
guys, like, kind of on this point, we've been really lucky at Grassroots to get funders who are relatively open to us, like, changing our program. I mean, we haven't changed our programs that much. We've had a set of really good funders, but the advice that I would give very practically about looking for funding is to be really critically aware of how different types of funders operate and what types of restrictions they might have as you go to scale. So right now with Grassroots, the majority of our funding comes from the DC government. We have a grant from the DC Public Schools, we have a grant from the DC Department of Health, and from the Mayor's Office of Economic Planning and Development. And that provides the majority of our annual operating budget. The problem is we have 427 athletes managed by 3 part-time staff, and we're going through a big transition now where we're hiring our first full-time staff. The government grants, and this is, I would say, pretty typical of government grants, are usually heavily restricted, and they have like very specific requirements about the maximum amount of money you can be spending on salary costs. So right now, we are having to find total new donors, individuals, small family foundations, and corporates who are willing to invest in the organization's infrastructure and capacity to expand our programs. And that's just not a reality with the government funders. So if I were to do it again, I would have gone back and thought from stage 1, these government funders are great, but let's leverage the fact that the government thinks we're legitimate to talk to these funders early on about what our long-term needs are. So that's would be my advice as well.
Yeah, Daniel participating in business development. Do you want to speak?
Yeah. Go for it.
Well, I'm embarrassed by it. It's Dragon Overboy 102. It's mad, more so mad because someone else took Dragon Overboy 101.
Oh.
But, anyways, yeah, our question is actually a question upon a question.
Okay.
And it's, how can we help others if we can't even help ourselves? And with that being said, it's like what Fidel mentioned, like once we're starting, we're trying to create startup enterprises, but like in order to help other people, how do we actually sustain our well-being while going through it? Because initial funding takes a long time. Applications go, and then if you want to say something else, Fidel?
Yeah. For example, we said that we are planning to work with non-profit organizations and start our own non-profit organization, but we are going back from El Salvador, from another country, so we are going back home. So we know that we have a lot of needs in our families waiting for us to help them. So how are you gonna help others and you need help for yourself? I mean, start for a job and try to raise some money to survive. So how are you gonna help others if you don't have nothing for yourself?
Essentially,
How can you make money?
Because we said we are just a dreamer.
Yeah, I had a huge problem with this because I turned down grad school to start Grassroots, and my parents thought I was absolutely crazy, and they're like, "You're on your own." And it was really hard to find a way to survive, and I had like a $1,400 credit limit. I had like the student credit card, so like it was very finite, like when I was gonna like have to give up or figure something else out. And I was able to get a job part-time that allowed me, they were really excited about me starting Grassroots, and so I was really lucky that they allowed me to sort of make my own hours. My general advice about this, and maybe things have changed a little bit in the last couple of years since fall of 2008, but I just got really frustrated because I would put together these like 1-pagers and 3-pagers and ask people who I thought would like definitely give me a little bit of money to start this off. And nobody really responded. And so what I did was I took my $1,400 credit card limit and I just started funding the pilot program on my own. And that was a big risk that I took, but it was really necessary because it took having started the program, having pictures of the program, having like a news story, having actual people behind it. Then I went and approached the same exact funders again with like a 2-line email saying, check this story out, check our new website out. We have this program, can we talk to you again? And that's when all of our funding started pouring in. So I mean, it's not the advice that you probably want to hear, but at least from my experience, I had to force myself to just like, within my means, like figure out how to survive through the period of establishing ourselves as at least like something that was happening and not just the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's clearly like no easy answer to that. I do think people definitely go that route. One of the other entrepreneurs I'm working with, and you know Pencils Thomas, he was an analyst at Bain at the time that he did it, and so that times have changed in just frankly the last 5 years with the kind of, just exposure you can get yourself, or even, funding through something like Kickstarter or otherwise that you can do online. And, it's still a little bit of a crapshoot, but there are more options than there used to be.
And you might know some more of these, but just some resources. Echoing Green, it's quite difficult to be selected to Echoing Green, but it's basically what they do is they pick 30 or so. Most of them actually just ideas are like very early stage projects, and they give like $30,000 to $60,000 of salary support. So they recognize this problem and they'll.
Yeah, in fact, they're the ones who, when I was telling the story earlier about the entrepreneur who got the offer on graduation and the Green Fellowship that he was talking about.
Thank you. I'm Joseph Biambarza. I'm from Congo. And when you were presenting about the three most important things you talked about talent, and I think talent is very important. Only that in the organization, especially non-profit organization, for example, to work in other countries, countries that are like they have realized that to work there means more than incentive to them sometimes. Incentive. So, how do you get people with talent, but also passion? Because someone can have talent, but then the situation they're working in without passion, I think it's really impossible to create a big problem. So, how do you get these people to talent and so to give their passion? How do you help them?
So how do you find the talent and the passion? To be honest, I actually wonder if, and Tyler, I'll let you take this, but then I just wonder if the other people in this room might even be better sources than me on this, in the sense that I haven't had the experience of being in the kind of very, very startup mode you're talking about. So the challenge I often am working with clients on is they found people with a lot of passion, but they're burning them out, and they're trying to figure out how to make life a little more sustainable. But on the actual initial, finding the people with passion. I don't know if you have thoughts, or we should open up to you.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a thought there.
I didn't hear exactly what you said, but going off what you said, I've been successful in not only finding people with passion. I developed a leadership program, environmental leadership program this year, and what we did is I took freshman and sophomore students, some who were very good leaders but kind of lacked the environmental passion, and then some that were very passionate but didn't have all that much good leadership skills. But we put them together and we did sessions on developing their environmental passion and developing leadership. And so you ended up with two really good sets of people that had enough passion and had enough leadership to then go out and and make things into action. And so I think that passion could be instilled in people.
That's really cool, and I'm curious though, how do you, so can you give an example of, in a session, someone who didn't have passion, how you kind of...
What worked best was really to get them talking to each other. And so it was the passionate students that really did most of the work and instilled that passion in others. They ended up becoming, best friends with each other. And so when two different people sort of hang out, they might go see a documentary that person wouldn't have gone to see otherwise. And so they expose them to all this new information and knowledge, and then they became, they took that on. And so it's been pretty great. Or another thing that we had was a roundtable discussion where we just brought in experts, and students led conversation amongst themselves that were facilitated by experts in energy, water, agriculture, and sustainability. And I got emails afterwards saying, "Hey, thanks. I became a tree hunter afterwards." So it does work.
maybe they've been trying too hard and their way of living is just miserable and they don't have any more motivation to carry out any kind of project or to do anything. You know, there's just the talent is there, but the passion has gone. So I guess what he was trying to ask is how you incentivize people to do that. So I guess one way is just educating them on how it is going to better their own life and how it is going to be able to, because the way, let's say, I'm coming to Nigeria, well, I'm not from Nigeria, I've been in this for a while, but I'm from Nigeria, and the way people are able to remain in projects when they're coming from a very civilized position is knowing that it's going to be able to sustain them in their own life and for the long run. So if you're able to give people the incentive that, hey, if you use your talent with, like, work with us, use your talent in this project, you'll be able to do good not just for others, but for yourself, and if you're going to be able to sustain your working skills with us, maybe you can also be able to sustain your current way of living with us. So I think what he's trying to say is how to get people who have absolutely no motivation to this kind of. I think one way is telling them that will be a way to sustain their goals.
Yeah, and one just this makes me think of a great book if you haven't read that or TED Talk and other things too. Daniel Pink's Thrive, which just and it applies to any kind. You could have a big organization and be trying to figure out how to motivate people or small tech. But we talk about some of the things like purpose, like autonomy, the different things that will give, and make it easier to motivate or what motivates.
I don't know if this addresses totally the circumstance we're talking about, but one of the issues we've had is early on, the athletic director at Georgetown said, our athletes don't have time to do community service, our athletes aren't interested, they're students and they're athletes and that's enough. And he said, come back to me if you get 10 athletes. And I realized in the recruiting process that not every Division I student athlete is going to care about the HIV prevalence in Washington, D.C. But I think it's really important when you think about trying to recruit talent, first identifying what talents you need in your organization and then trying to figure out what are going to be different motivators for people. So I was telling Preeta this morning, like one of the big draws for our volunteers is the social component of the program. The fact that we have like student athletes often don't really like socialize a whole lot outside of their teams, but they have so much in common with other people who are athletes in their school and with other athletes around the city. So I think a lot of athletes join Grassroots, maybe because they care about the issue, but because they're excited about like this really intense experience where they're going to leave their campus and they're going to interact with other student athletes from their university and from other universities. So then once they see the difference they're making and realize how important the issue is, their eyes are opened, and then their motivation becomes very different. But we just have to be very conscious in thinking about what are going to be the draws for the different types of people and different types of talent we need for our organization.
I was going to say what you were talking about. So I have a project in the informal settlements of Nairobi, Kenya. Was involving them in the original needs assessment, or involving the community in general. Having them lead the focus group discussions, do surveys, doing interviews, and having conversations, and really figuring out what the need around the issue was. And then it wasn't even a recruitment issue. It was everybody wants to be involved. They came back, gave these reports of what the situation was, what the need was, and what the community thought the solution was. And they came to me and said, we want to do this, how can we make this happen? So I think often it's forgotten that how important the community is in that initial stages of defining what the solution can be. And in doing that, that you're giving them ownership of it and letting them be involved in the social development of their community, which is honestly in this field often forgotten. And in that case, people became pretty motivated and dedicated to the cause.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is David Gould, and it's funny you brought up potential economics because we were just talking about that in our breakout session. By far my favorite charity, Adam Braun. That's fantastic. So my question was, what do you guys think are the top 2 qualities that distinguish an effective leader, drawn from your experiences in both the public and private sectors? Maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah. You know, I apologize for being redundant, I guess, but I mean, I think I would go back to, I mean, and it's really only one thing that I've seen that's similar, and that is the ability to recognize whether it's you know, individually or organizationally, what the weaknesses are, and be willing to sort of face those honestly and compensate for or address them. I mean, other things that I'm just struck by, particularly with social entrepreneurs. One, sometimes I think you guys are just like crazy in a way, because there's just such a like willingness to like focus on what and be dedicated to what other people, consultants like me, would tell you like 15 reasons why that's not going to work. And yet you're just, you know, you're single-minded, and I really appreciate that. And it also allows you to kind of rise above the fray of what can otherwise be. I mean, Tyler was telling me about the things he's got on his plate over the next few weeks, and you know, it's just daunting, but somehow he managed to do that. I really appreciate that.
I would just add that by saying, basically echoing this point, and saying that like if the problem that you're addressing with your commitments is real and big, and it's still a problem, it means no one has successfully addressed it yet. If that's the truth, it means that your job as a leader is going to be incredibly difficult, and you're going to get tons of people saying this isn't going to work or whatever. So like for that reason, you should be prepared to get lots of no's and to fail a lot. But at the same time, you do need to have some humility as a leader to be open to criticism and to actually listen to it and think about which parts are valid and which parts are people just being really closed-minded about this issue. And I think I only really, like when you first get started, if you're successful, you get lots of attention, and you're like, we're doing everything perfect, all you need to do is just add more programs, and it's going to be huge in a couple of years. But you need to be really critical of yourself as a leader, and like we're saying, like, think about what your weaknesses are and how, as you grow, you're going to be able to address those weaknesses. So, I mean, I think an effective leader spends some time every week just thinking about what they could have done better that week, how the challenges they had that week might continue if they don't address them, that kind of stuff.
And I actually had a conversation with an entrepreneur a few weeks ago where I was asking her how she sorts the criticisms or the sort of negative comments that she wants to address from the ones that she doesn't. And you know, part of it is over time she hears trends and she's hearing the same comment over and over. The other is she's been particularly good about having a group of really kind of informal advisors or mentors, and I think you know, my suggestion, if you haven't already started to find those people who you can trust, is to cultivate that. You don't need a lot of those people, but if you've worked with someone and it went and you really had a strong relationship and you know, you're moving on to other things, do try to, you know, don't hesitate to say to them, will you continue to be an advisor to me? Nope, everybody loves that. Like, people love that. That's like the biggest compliment you can give someone. So, you know, try to do that.
Yeah, if you are starting a nonprofit organization, you legally have to have like a board of directors, which for me, it was people who I saw as mentors. But I think even if you're not starting a nonprofit, thinking about creating this kind of board of mentors for yourself is really helpful. And trying to pick people that you know really respect you and love you, but are smart enough and you know have the guts to disagree with you and challenge you. And I have like a couple people in DC who I meet all the time, and it's always them arguing with me, but it's a really productive argument about the future of the organization and like what I'm going to be doing in 5 years. So yeah, find a board of directors, but not just people who are going to tell you you're awesome all the time. Find people who will really be there to criticize you as well.
Yeah, my question was, how do you keep membership sustained throughout every year? You know, if you have a program inside a college level, how do you keep that membership going throughout the year? Because if you have a problem, you know, you have problems going at the beginning of the year, and then it sort of like tapers off, and you have to keep getting new members every year. And also, when you have your leadership team, how do you keep those leaders, that leadership team accountable to your delegating tasks to make sure that people are doing it?
I'll let you take the membership question, because it's not on the task that I've taken.
Yeah, it's really challenging for us because the nature of our organization is that it's driven at every level to some degree by college student athletes who at a maximum are working for us for 4 years. So what I think we do successfully is we really try to identify kind of individual champions who are like the popular members of a certain team or who we know we can get to be the recruiters. And we've had weird ways with Grassroots where like we'll have the entire track team at one school be involved for all 4 years, and then when that charismatic leader of the track team graduates, the next year we have like 2 people from the track team. So I think it's just a matter of thinking about who are going to be your champions and what you want the body of your leadership, your team to look like, and just, you know, sometimes giving them a title helps, but just trying to like make sure that they're actively worried about, you know, continuing to make sure there are people coming into the people coming into the organization.
On the accountability front, I mean, the thing I will say, and this is true of like, you know, whether you're working with students or, you know, full-time managers, staff, is that I've been surprised over the years at how often when it seems like someone's just sort of like not doing what they're supposed to do, it's really a problem with clearly communicating the expectations. So literally having, you know, regular conversations where you say, okay, I'm sorry, I know this is like pedantic, but like, so this is what we're agreeing to do by this time, by when. And, you know, luckily email now is a great way to like make it a habit after every conversation to send an email and say, okay, great, so to recap what I understand we're doing is blah and blah, right? And so, because I think, you know, particularly in these volunteer situations, no one has to be doing this, right? Everybody means well. So if something's not happening, and then the other thing is actually being very clear with people, look, if you're not going to be able to do something, just tell me, and tell me sooner rather than later. It's totally fine, we're all overwhelmed, but I can't solve the problem, I can't help solve the problem unless you give me some warning, right? And I think people will appreciate that permission. If someone keeps not being able to do things, then you just know that, you know, they just don't have the capacity, you're going to get less from them.
On a super practical level, we have this leadership team of 8 student athletes who are involved with fundraising, doing evaluation, doing program planning, and PR. And I will have just a Word document. We have calls every 2 weeks. And I just, out of each call, I have like their action points that they talk about, the action points that I have to like be accountable to them. And then each week I will send them that, and I think that, like, early on I would just be like, everyone would volunteer to do everything, and I'd be like, awesome, and I'd forget half the stuff people were going to do, and then I'd be like, this grant's...
When everyone volunteers to do something, no one can do it.
Yeah,
So.
and I'd be like, this grant's due tomorrow, and then it just wasn't there. So I think, like, I mean, you don't want to kill people's motivations by, like, operationalizing everything to the extent where, like, they're in an Excel spreadsheet, you know, like, the time you know, we go to them. But I think it is important to, like, just do simple things like recap what are people agreeing to, and if they continue to not follow through, ask, hey, why is this happening? Maybe we're just trying to commit too much, and maybe we should scale back and say, like, let's do one thing every 2 weeks for the organization, and that's like just having those check-ins can be really helpful.
Hi, thanks. My name is Olivia, and I have 2 questions for each speaker, for Preeta and Tyler. My first question is, how can leaders who have just started their businesses balance the fine line between running on an innovative idea and dreaming and being an idealistic visionary, and also being a team manager and really creating an internal capacity that can lead more than just yourself, leading a team of 5 or 10 or 100. it seems to me that there's like a trade-off between the two. I always want to run in one direction where I see, myself or the organization going in 5 or 10 years. But then at the same time, I'm also very concerned about the people that I'm working with and making sure that I can help meet their expectations and empower them and make sure that they can do their job and within my organization. So how do you see that dynamics play out? And if you've ever had experience with that in your organization. And then my second question to Preeta is, if there seems to be a great disparity between the profit sector and the nonprofit sector, and the ethical perspective on raising money and driving profit. For example, we don't seem to, let me rephrase that. For people who help others, we don't incentivize them to make profit, because for some reason it's really bad to make money helping people in developing countries. It doesn't click. But yet someone else who's in the profit sector can run a large profit, multi-million dollars, and still be valued for it. For example, one of our students here, if you made $1 million off your project tomorrow, you'd probably have some criticism, actually a lot of criticism, and maybe even have a lot of negative support. But someone else who makes like a video game that teaches 10-year-olds to kill each other with assault rifles gets posted on like Wired magazine. So I just see that great disparity between the ethical conduct of the nonprofit and profit sector, and I was hoping that maybe you could speak about that. Long question. Really apologize. It's been on my mind for a while.
I'll start with my question. This has been a huge challenge because the thing I'm most passionate about, like I said before, is like the program side, and think of new ideas and improving our programs. And the reason, one of my points of advice was to think about longevity is I've spent about the last 8 months building structures and systems in our organization so that we are able to get money from people, so that then I will hopefully be able to use this money to think about improving our programs. So I mean, I think and the reason also that's really important to understand is that we're in this context where the model of our organization is that we are 100% dependent on donors. So at this stage in the organization, we're 3.5 years old. If we want to start hiring staff, if we want to start getting substantial grants, we need to start checking these boxes that donors have as like a pre-screening. Like, do you have this anti-discrimination policy? Do you have this, handbook on emergencies? Do you have all these different insurance policies? And in order to do that, it's me sitting in this office forever, like Googling the insurance policies and things that aren't that exciting. But I think as you reach that level, those things become very important. So the earlier on you can budget 5% of your time to think about team structure and management, the better off you will be when those things become absolutely paramount to you being able to have time to innovate and scale up the organization. So, I mean, it's a tough thing. The other option is just to find someone else that you can hire to do all that stuff. But I think the reality is early on, you're wearing every hat, and for me, that's been an amazing learning experience. But when you're wearing every hat, you just have to be really strategic about thinking about what are the priorities and how should you be dividing your time between innovation and the rudimentary structures of an organization.
Yeah, I mean, and just a little bit on that, which is, I do think there are a lot of people out there who what they want to do is the more sort of blocking and tackling. They really enjoy you think about where you are in school or whatever organizations you're part of. There are those people who are the ones who organize things, who get things done, who just and who aren't particularly interested in being visionary. And so when you do find those people, and they're not that rare, I mean, they're a good chunk of the population, start using them in a way that they'll enjoy, and they'll enjoy the fact that you're being visionary and they don't have to worry about that. So on the question of sex, ethics and the nonprofit and for-profit sector. No, I guess I would just say a few things. One is that I would be very careful to characterize, nonprofit good, for-profit bad. I think maybe there was a time when it made sense to do that, but I think increasingly those lines are being blended, and frankly, we have a lot of clients who, the way they're having impact is to partner with for-profit organizations who have great, supply chains and other things like that. And for-profit sector, for a variety of reasons, some of it has to do with just sort of corporate social responsibility in that movement. Some of that has to do with people like you who end up in those organizations, but who you are hasn't changed, right? Really saying we can do this better than we have. So I wouldn't, and in fact, I think a lot of the most interesting work these days, sort of the social well-being work, is being done by these kind of hybrid organizations. So, I don't think it's uncommon actually. I mean, if one of you makes $1 million in profit in your work, I mean, I don't think anyone will sort of raise eyebrows about that as long as what they see is that you're just plowing that back into somebody else's innovative idea or your own innovative idea, and that's how many organizations are working these days. So, I know I didn't tackle everything you said, but.
So I think we need to.
That's right. Yeah, I think we've hit our time for the day. I'd like to thank our speakers. Just 1 second before you guys head out.
I want to say one more bit of advice, and that is to be really conscious of the people that are around you here, because you can easily go to every single session and listen to people like us talk. But from my experience at CGI, this past summer I met Barbara Bush, who is partnering with us now to give us our first ever full-time staff. So skip one session today. I don't know. And just make sure that, but when you leave here, you learn stuff from the speakers, but also meet people like yourselves who can help you out. And the last thing is the emails. Did you guys see the email pad going around? Did it make it around? I'm working on this web platform for young people to share resources and organizational capacity and leadership, and it's in the very early stages right now. But I'm going to take the email pad and email you guys in a couple of weeks when it's all ready to be populated. Where is it now?
I don't know. It's right here.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thanks, guys.